Hello stampers! Today's video is going to be about the things you can do with Versamark ink. So I don't think people realize how versatile Versamark ink is, and I know when I first started stamping I bought 3 or 4 different kinds of ink which I thought would be similar or work better than Versamark ink, and then I found out over the years that Versamark ink does all of the things that those other inks did, and so this has been a lifesaver. As you can see, I have 2 of them here. One of them is the older one, which I think is this one. Nope, that's the newer one. This is the older one. And you can see this one I've had for a very long time, and it does get stained and dirty, and I just, recently bought the new one. But the time to replace ink pads is when you start to see that they really start to get dingy and they start to pull away from the stamp block. Then I would get a new one. But I do have 2. I try to keep one for my videos as the clean one. I have one in my stash with my inks, and then I have one in my stash with my embossing stuff. So very good thing to have. The only thing I would also recommend is when you buy it, also buy the re-inker, because you're going to find that you do use it a lot. This is a very sticky ink, so you do want to buy the re-inker with it. Alright, so let's get started here. The first thing I think most people use Versamark ink for is what I would call the very obvious, which is doing embossing. So you take your image, stamp it down, and I should have used an embossing static thing, but that's another video. You take your colored embossing powder, put it down, it sticks to the ink, and we heat it up. Okay, so simple enough. I think that's what most people use their Versamark for. But wait, there's more. By the way, this stamp is from Stampin' Up's Celebration Epic Celebration set, and this was Wendy Vecchi's embossing powder in Sunflower. Nice golden yellow color. All right, so you can see that. Pretty simple there. The other thing I don't think people think about is you can actually emboss in any color. So let's say you didn't have colored embossing powder. I have a stamp mounted here in my stamping tool. And I'm going to stamp that down. Actually, I wanted to do that in a colored ink. Colored ink here. That's right, it's not going to hurt anything. Alright, now let's say I wanted to heat emboss this. Well, normally using a dye ink, you wouldn't be able to heat emboss it because the dye ink dries so very quickly. So now what we're going to do is we are going to re-stamp that image with the Versamark ink pad. And I did not clean off my stamp, so now there is ink all over my Versamark pad. And now we can take this image with our clear embossing powder. Okay, so I did not have that color embossing powder, but I was able to stamp the image with the ink and then stamp it again with Versamark in the same position and then use clear embossing powder over it, and it looks like it is been embossed with colored embossing powder. So that's the second way you can use it for embossing. Okay. The third way that you can use it is to, again, stamp the image out. And this time we're going to use glue activated powder. Now this is from the powder keg, I think. Yeah, the powder keg. I think Ranger also sells it now. But we're going to put that glue activated powder on our image. And very similar to embossing, we're going to glitter this. So because this is heat activated glue powder, you kind of want to work quickly here. And this is just regular microfine glitter. We're going to heat the powder up until it turns clear. And then we're going to shake our glitter over it. And now you can see that the image has glitter on it. Now obviously you would clean that up, or use the EK Success Powder Tool or your embossing buddy or whatever you have. But there's another use with glue powder. All right, so that's all has to do with heat embossing and glitter. I'm using a little Swiffer here to clean this up. The other way is what Versamark was meant for, which is tone-on-tone stamping. So you just take your colored paper, or watermark you could call it, so it doesn't look like much now, but I'm going to set it aside and you will see that that ink will soak into the paper and it will darken the image, so you have what's called Versamark or watermark, or tone-on-tone stamping. So we'll give that a second. Another way is doing resist. So I've taken that same stamp and already stamped it on this piece of glossy paper. And then I'm going to just take some distress ink and a distressing tool and lightly sponge over that image. So here you can see the ink has again soaked into the paper and it has resisted the distress ink blended over it. So now we have this background with a white stamped image with distress ink blended over it without using any kind of heat embossing. You see that? I know it's a light blue, so it's kind of hard to see. All right, so with that, one way I've talked about several times is the conditioned stamps, especially silicone stamps. If you have a new stamp that you've gotten and it's just not accepting the ink, usually that's because of the manufacturing process. There's a film left over the stamp. So the first thing you want to do when you get your stamps is to clean your stamps thoroughly. Something I like to use on my stamps is a little brush. This is a soft brush. This is from Close to My Heart. It does a very good job at cleaning the stamps and getting into all the nooks and crannies. And then I take a eraser and I just lightly rub the top of the stamp. This is especially true for silicone stamps. And then I like to stamp it with the Versamark ink a few times. And what that does is it just gets in and it conditions and it primes the stamp and it teaches it to accept the ink a little easier for you. It also protects your stamps from staining. If you're using photopolymer stamps, they stain. You can use this method to help prevent the darker colors from staining into your stamps. Okay. And then I think this is the last way of using the stamps. Let me show you guys here. The watermark has kind of dried now, so you can see how much darker that is. Here's the ones I just stamped, so they're not as dark, but here you can see where it's the Versamark has soaked into the paper and it's much darker, so you have that watermark look. So another method would be using your chalks or perfect pearls. So we're just going to, again, stamp this image out a couple times here. Because this is a clear sticky ink, it stays wet for a little while. Some of us have these in our stash. So you have perfect pearls, you have chalks. I don't know if they still manufacture these or not, but I'm sure you've seen other versions of them at art stores. And you can take a little cotton swab or like a Q-tip or something, and you just rub into the chalk and then rub it where your image is, and then that chalk will adhere to your stamped image. This is great if you're doing like background scenery, using chalks on cards and things, and I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about chalks, but it's still a medium that I think is very popular in stamping and doing backgrounds and skies and things like that. So if you have chalks, and I have these, and then I also have these. And then the last way is to, same method but using perfect pearls. And I like this method because it gives it a nice shimmer and it uses very, very little. So you just take a soft brush. When you buy the perfect pearls in sets, they normally come with brushes. And again, we've stamped that image down, and I'm just going to take the little bit that's in the lid here. You really don't need a lot. It's a super fine mica powder, and it will stick to your image. And you don't need to use a lot. You're just going to use a little bit at a time. It's highly pigmented, but it has a nice pearlescent metallic shimmer to it. So now we have a nice colored stamped image with using perfect pearls. So this one's using perfect pearls, and you can see some of the shine there. This one's using chalk, and then once this is dry, you can go back in with your paintbrush or an eraser, and you can actually get that excess chalk off of there. Okay, so just to give you an idea. So there we go. We have 5, 6, 7 different ways of using Versamark ink. So obviously with regular embossing, and then there was embossing with a color you don't have, which I lost. And then you have using it with the glue powder to do glitter embossing. You have resist stamping, you have watermark stamping, and then you have using it with perfect pearls and chalk, and also to use it to condition your stamps. So I hope this was helpful for any of you who don't know how to use Versamark, or you picked up some ideas on it. And if you have any questions, post them below. Thanks for watching, and keep on stamping.